Hello, hello. It is October 26th, 2024. We are finished with Saturday's games in the chess league. And I guess getting right into how the day went, we had a new guy named Billy show up. And me and him played like a ton of games. We played like a few 10-0 games, a few 5-0 games, and then we played like a ton of 1+1 just because why not? Um, it was it was funny. It was a funny time. We were just kind of bantering a whole bunch. Um, it was I think we like played in total for like 2 hours, just like that mixture of time controls. And I didn't play my first league game until like 4:15 or so. Like I took a break after a couple of those bullet games, and then yeah, so finally we get into league games, and we played way past the usual time slot that we play. Usually we play until 5 and then do something else, but we just like kept playing. It was interesting. I'm not complaining, by the way. Like I was totally down to just like keep playing. But yeah, we'll get actually into the games now. The first league game I played was against Anthony. He had the white pieces, so actually let me flip this board over. And I've been saying it all month, but I've been playing the new openings. I'm finally getting to a conclusion with them, so I don't know if I'll end it or conclude this video with what I feel, and then I don't know. We'll see what happens. But so I have the black pieces, and we go straight into a Sicilian. He goes into an Alapin, to which I respond with d5, which is one of the two critical moves, from what I understand. Knight f6 is the other one, and basically you're trying to contest the center before white gets to play d4 and try to trade c pawns and be left with two center pawns. So d5 right away. He takes right away, and I was trying to remember if I take the pawn on d5 immediately or if I play knight f6 first, because I remember watching something where they're like, yeah, you can play knight f6 first just to, I don't know, do something. But yeah, so queen takes d5 was slightly better, but I played knight f6. He played knight f3. He's just giving me the pawn, so I take. He plays bishop c4 to attack my knight. It's properly defended because my queen still sees it, so I'm not too afraid. So I try to go for a fianchetto. I play g6. He castles, bishop g7, and then d3. I didn't really know what he was trying to get at with d3. I mean, I guess he's trying to open his bishop, but usually people play d4 rather than d3. So yeah, I wasn't really sure what he was trying to get at with d3 besides opening his bishop up, but I just castled. Knight b d2, developing the knight, because like that's one of the drawbacks of playing the Alpin. Because your pawn is on c3, your knight is a little awkward to develop. It's still a good opening, but that's one of the unfortunate, or maybe not unfortunate, but one of the downsides of playing this opening. I go with b6. He plays rook e1. I play e6. I thought he was attacking my pawn. I mean, obviously it's defended now, but if he takes here, then he gets a free pawn. And b6. I just wanted to fianchetto this bishop and see what happens. But e6. Then he plays knight f1, which I was like, okay, so you're rerouting here? Or are you trying to like do a kingside attack or something? That was on my mind. But I didn't see a way for him to do a kingside attack. The center it's not closed, but it's not like super open. So I wasn't really sure what he was trying to get at. So bishop b7, right? There's the whole point of playing this pawn chain. Well, more so this b6 move. Knight g3, like I expected. I'm developing knight d7. He plays bishop d2. Again, I'm not really sure what his pieces are doing here. I mean, the knight on f3 is pretty common, but I wasn't really sure what he was trying to do with knight g3 and bishop d2. But at the same time, I didn't know how to punish it, which was really the big problem of the game. So knight 7 f6, h3. Again, not really concerned. Like, okay, I can't play knight g4 anymore, but I think that was fine, right? Here I'm trying to expand on the queen side with a6. He plays queen c1. He's trying to trade off this bishop here, which is pretty common in setups where you have a fianchettoed bishop here. But I continue b5, bishop b3, and then rook c8. He tries to trade the bishop off. I'm not gonna take here and let him get his queen into my position here. There's not really any point. Also because then knight g5 is coming, and it's like, how do you stop this? I guess I have a knight, but it's not really the best way to go about it. Knight e7, I'm trying to reroute to f5. I was thinking maybe my pawn structure becomes a little weird, but at least I have an open line, and like I can try to figure something out from there. This position was super equal. The computer is actually saying all zeros for knight e5 and bishop g7, but for white, that is. But when I was playing it, I was just bored out of my mind. There was like nothing in this position. Like there was nothing happening. I should have considered. I was considering actually just taking and eroding his pawn structure, but he did play knight e5, so that's fine. I played bishop d5. I was hoping to trade and maybe we'll just get into an endgame and play an endgame, but he declines. Knight c6, again trying to just like trade some stuff off and like maybe get into an endgame. He trades off my good bishop, which I thought was, that was kind of his plan the entire time, and I can't really get out of it. I guess I could have tried like playing rook e8 here, so that maybe I could play bishop h8 or something, but nah, that looks too weird. A3, trade on e5, queen c7. I'm not really sure what I'm doing here, if I'm going to be completely honest. Like, I was just looking for moves. I was already down a minute on the clock just because this position felt so lifeless. I wasn't really sure what I should be doing here. Queen e3. So I was looking through the game as I was inputting it from my recordings, and apparently this is where I had my biggest advantage. Knight d7 was apparently the move, to which I guess his rook is a little awkwardly placed. Rook g5 is the only move. Well, yeah, rook g5 is the only square. I actually didn't really see that at all, if I'm going to be completely honest, but yeah, I mean, I didn't really see this move. But all right, so I tried to open things up with b4, and clearly this is not the way to go. At least, computer. I'm opening the position, which I thought was fine, but I guess this trade is not really favorable for me. I also didn't even consider what he played in the game, which was c4. For some reason, I thought he was going to take here, or I thought like rook a6 was a move as well, but yeah, he played c4. I was like, oh, I didn't catch that at all. So I retreated and defended my a pawn. Now my b pawn's a little overextended, and I can't really push it because he's got two rooks on it. So this is kind of where it starts going downhill. He plays rook a4, and I play queen c2, just trying to keep everything together. I'm kind of okay with giving up that pawn just because like defending it is a little too difficult, and I don't think I'd be able to get enough defenders on it. He plays f3. I mean, I was also threatening this little checkmate, and he saw it, of course, so good on him. Now I play knight d7, which the computer wanted me to play it before, but the difference was that I had a bishop here to block the path of the rook from escaping, or from moving in general, really. So he plays rook a5, rook e5, and here I just I had a mental slip, like totally just did not look at this position correctly. And I played knight c5, and he can do what he did in the game, which is take on b4, and now my bishop is kind of loose, and like the way these things are tied down is just not really working out. Right, so he takes my knight, and then obviously he's attacking this, and also attacking this. I don't really have a piece to win back, so yeah, I was gonna end up losing a piece regardless. I decided to do it this way by taking on g3. After he takes my bishop on b7, I take his rook on c5, and after the trade, I give him a check. Goes king h2. At this point, I was down on the clock still because I just like couldn't figure out a plan this entire time, and clearly he had something. I was actually really considering here rook c8, which I know he would think for a while on like why I'm playing this move, but if he were to take, I was hoping I can somehow get a stalemate. Which I don't know if this is forced, but h2, queen e5, f4. Queen f4 here, and now I don't have anything. Queen e3, queen c1. Yeah, queen e3. He can run this way and avoid perpetual. So I would have to win the bishop at this point. But yeah, it's just not enough. Obviously, I can't take that pawn. But yeah, I was hoping for a perpetual somehow, but I kind of knew that it would be a stretch for me to get a perpetual. But the game continues. Bishop a4, rook d8. I'm trying to just like awkwardly hope that there is somehow a perpetual here. After he plays d4, I totally missed the idea that he can trade queens and basically just win the game on the spot. So I played rook a8, and then he forces the queen trade. I played rook d8, just like there's not really much for me to do here. And after rook a7, I just resigned because, I mean, I'm losing this pawn. He has two pass pawns, two pieces to bring them all down. Like, I don't have nearly enough counterplay to try to play this position out, so I just resigned. Yeah, so I just like totally mentally slipped on knight d5 here, or knight c5, sorry. Like, this was just not great, but you know, these things happen. I was still kind of recovering from playing bullet, so I think that's kind of why I was just so, like, I don't know, I felt slowed down almost to the point where I wasn't seeing anything. But bullet brain, I guess. Okay, so after I played Anthony, Anthony wanted me and Wayne to play some games, so we did. We did end up playing 5 games in total, me and Wayne. One of the games, which was my best game out of those 5, didn't get recorded. I thought I hit record on the phone, on a camera phone. I did not, but it was a King's Indian where I ended up getting a really good attack on his king, and he missed a mate in 1. Well, I don't know if it was mate in 1, but he missed a checkmate threat and didn't defend it properly. So, yeah, I guess from my perspective, the mate was like, his king was on g2, my knight was on h3, defended by a pawn, and then I had some kind of rook f2 mate here. So that was the game that didn't get recorded. But I will show you the 4 other games, much to my dismay, actually, because as you'll see in this game, yeah, things happened here. In 2 of the games, I realized how bad it was. Let's just put it that way. So again, playing d4 as my new opening for the month, which I am actually going to just stop doing going forward, and we'll see what happens. So d4 e6. I know e6 is one of those moves where it's like, haha, I could go into a French, or I could play a d4 opening. You don't know. I didn't even consider the fact that I could play e4 here and try to get him into a French. I kind of just autopiloted and played knight f3, and then he went knight f6. So we're going into almost the mainland Catalan, except he plays an immediate c5. And I was trying to remember my notes here on how to play this structure, and I remembered that both in more so through my analysis and like looking back at games, but I know in these kinds of structures, you can actually just push c4 and get into like a Tarrasch kind of position where you have these 4 pawns right here. So I knew that was an idea. I also knew that if he takes here, I can take back with the knight and it's fine. And I don't even have to take back with the knight right away. I can just wait for him to take. I can like castle, let him play like something like knight c6 and then take. But yeah, so I was like not really afraid. c4 for black would have been interesting, but I could also just play c3 and we get this very locked structure, which again resembles a French, except I haven't pushed d4 yet. So, you know, in hindsight, I didn't consider c4, but I was like, if he played that, I probably would have just played c3 and went into, yeah, like I said, just went into a French kind of structure. So, castles, knight c6. And now I play c4, so now we're kind of in a Tarrasch-ish structure. And from here, I kind of knew what my plan was. I wanted to try to get him into an IQP structure, somehow getting e4 in, and maybe we'll trade some stuff here, and he's left with the isolated d5 pawn. But he plays a6 first. I thought he was trying to play b5, so I just took on d5 first. He takes back with the knight, so no IQP for him, but I figured something about that move wasn't totally right. I started with knight c3 just to develop some. I know my queenside development's kind of lacking. Now he does play b5, which, you know, it's fine. It gets space on the queen side, but I didn't think it was too big of a deal. Here I apparently missed a4 and knight takes d5. a4. What is it? a4, bishop b7. What about... See, I didn't like a4, b4. Like, this just optically looks bad. But I guess you take on d5. And apparently this is +2 for white. See, I don't understand this opening. Like, I swear, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, sometimes you just have huge advantages like this, even though material's equal, but like, I don't see the positional advantage in this position for white. Like, black has queenside space, development's almost equal. But anyway, I go for an immediate e4 just because I'm getting tempo on the knight and I'm gonna just grab more space in the center. He retreats with knight c7. Apparently d5 is the way to go. I didn't play d5 because d5, I figured he would trade, and yeah, the center opens, but I'm not really getting an attack in because I saw this ed5, something like here, but apparently this is +5. Like, somebody explain to me why this is +5. I don't get it. I really don't. I might need to drop this opening as well, but I'll probably give you unfiltered thoughts at the end, or maybe in a separate video, just in general, because yeah. Anyway, so I played e5, which to me made a little more sense, or it felt more natural because I'm getting a lot of space. Makes it a little uncomfortable for him to castle queenside or kingside, maybe, but vague ideas. Bishop b7, knight g5, and he plays f6. So I was like, okay, him playing f6 is probably not good. I did consider taking on f6, but I figured it wouldn't do much because after g takes f6, like, I don't know, my bishop is going backwards anyway. But apparently knight e5 works, which, again, knight e5, knight takes e5, bishop f6, and he can't take because of this. Queen f5, bishop b7. Like, oh man. So I retreated my bishop. He plays f5, which definitely rubbed me the wrong way. And by that I mean, it didn't seem like that's what he should be doing. But again, I didn't really know how to counter it too well. I did go back to g5 to poke at his queen, and he plays queen d7. I tried rerouting my knight. I think I just wanted to add a defender to this pawn, also because I wanted to move this knight at some point to try to open this diagonal. He plays h6. I move back to e3 with the bishop, and then he plays g5, and I'm like, oh. On the one hand, I was like, this might be a little spooky, but on the other hand, I didn't quite see where his attack was. Like, he doesn't have pieces towards my king. It's just pawns, so I figured it should be okay. I take on c5 after like what feels like 10 moves. I didn't want to take on c5 earlier because I wanted him to move his bishop first, so that he would waste time to move the bishop and then take on c5. But yeah, that just never happened. So yeah, knight d5. Here I'm just trying to hold everything together with bishop d4. He plays g4, but I'm just like, okay, I'll just move my knight to d2. Apparently this is now like slightly better for black. h5 is the move, but again, I don't see an attack really. He ends up taking on d4. I take back. He takes the pawn on c5, which, you know, it was kind of free, but yeah, material is equal, so I was kind of just like, yeah, whatever. Things are fine. I played knight 2b3, and he retreats his bishop. I'm grabbing the open file. I know he wants to keep the bishop pair, but he's also just like spending a lot of tempo moving his bishops around, and I'm kind of making ways, maybe, sort of. But yeah, I didn't really know. Here he played king f7, which instinctively looks weird, but I guess in this situation is fine because I'm not really going to attack his king, you know, with all of his pawns in the way and everything. It also connects his rook. Castling probably would have been fine, but at least with this position, your king is closer to the center if we get into an endgame, which may or may not happen. Hard to say. I played h3 just to try to like try to pick away at these pawns, but he just defends it with h5, so I was like, okay, well, now what? Queen d2. So I wanted to connect my rooks, but apparently this is not the way to go. But then he plays king g6. I'm like, I feel like there should be a way for me to punish this, but I just don't know how. I was thinking h4 in the back of my mind to try to allow my queen to get in, but I didn't see anything concrete. Like, I saw h4, and then he just runs his king away, and if I try to infiltrate with queen g5, I mean, there's nothing there. So I didn't really see a point in playing that. I did try to play knight c5 just to... I mean, it's not really a fork on the bishop and the queen. Like, I mean, yeah, I'm attacking them both, but he can just trade. And I was totally fine with trading here because I got my rook to c5. And if he tries to do what he did in the game, like either rook to c8, I'm just going to bring my f rook to c1. Now I control the file. Here, he kind of makes a mistake and plays queen g7. And I calculated a small little line here, which is what got played in the game. I can take the pawn. I'm attacking his queen. And, okay, you can grab my pawn on e5, but now I have this check knight f5, or knight f4. If you take my knight, I take your queen. And I'm also just going to win the knight. Like, if you don't take it. He did take it. And I'm like, okay, give me your queen then. And here he realized he messed up. He traded off one pair of rooks for whatever reason, and then took my bishop on g2. And here I'm like, okay, this looks like a ladder mate right about here. All right, because I have the queen and the rook, and the king doesn't really have a way to go. Like if the king moves into g5, I just have mate. So I'm like, okay, let's start ladder mate. Queen c6. And yeah, that's not a move. It's not a move. So I played it, and then he takes it, and I'm just like, wow. I really just threw this game. I threw this game. It's okay, sure. Takes knight, and as you'll see, he keep playing moves. He trades off my rook. He gets his bishop trapped, but it doesn't even matter because this is still a winning like pawn endgame with the h pawn. And yeah, we just play a bunch more moves. These aren't the exact moves, but same difference. Like, okay. So I threw my queen. Obviously I was really upset that I let that happen. And after the game, I was just like, I literally like tilted my head back and like sat back in my chair. I'm like, there's probably so many million other moves I could have played. I was like, what did I miss? Like, what was a... Well, obviously I missed the diagonal and the queen being on the bishops. I could have just taken on... In this position, I could have just taken on f4. And like, I don't know why I didn't just immediately just take on f4. It would have been so easy. But, because these two things are hanging, but I thought I had mate, I guess. And that's what happens. That's what happens when you don't look at diagonals. So, like, if I just played this, it's over, right? He's got to move his bishop. I wouldn't blunder my queen. It would have been fine. But yet, I did blunder my queen. Fantastic. Yeah. Horrible game. This is the third game I'll go over. Or sorry, the second game I'll go over. Well, technically the third if you count Anthony's game. But anyway, this is the third game we played, I believe, or you know what I mean. So he plays, I know this already, but he plays d4 knight f3 against my knight f6, so I have to go into another King's Indian, which I should know by now, but yet kind of makes me annoyed that I can't play a knight's tango. And here he plays into like a classical King's Indian, kind of, where you have these three pawns. I think the knight is supposed to be on c3 in the classical King's Indian, but yeah. So I played knight fd7, and the reason I played that was I know in some, well, not in some, I know in a London setup where you kind of have these two pawns, or not these two pawns, this knight and the bishop here. This is actually a decent move because it opens up the bishop to control e5. The knight now controls e5. And I mean, this pawn has been controlling e5. So now you can push e5. And maybe you can even play knight c6. But I didn't like knight c6 because of d5. But I guess it still works. Anyway. Yeah, knight c6 would have been an interesting move. But I played knight d7, knight fd7 to try to immediately push e5. He backs his bishop up, which is fine. I play e5 anyway. He closes the center. And here I played c5. After the game, I kind of mentioned, like, I felt like c5 was a mistake because for some reason I thought he was going to take en passant. I don't know why. I should have, if I was going to push my c pawn, c6 is probably better. Just to try to like chip away at this, because getting this lock structure is like, it's fine, but this knight and this bishop just like cannot do anything right now. So trying to close it down, I just like don't have space. But after c5, he plays a3. I played knight back to f6. A little waste of time, but this position is pretty closed, so it's not the worst thing in the world. Bishop b2, knight bd7, rook b1. I was like, okay, he's trying to push b4, but do I care? Maybe. I decided to play queen a4. I was hoping to get cheeky and try to play like some kind of knight e4 idea, but he plays b4 immediately. I missed that I could totally just take this a pawn for free. Like, I don't know, I just didn't play it. I saw it in the back of my mind. I remember like seeing this idea where if you play b4 too early, your a pawn hangs, but I just like didn't play it for whatever reason. So I played cb5, and then he takes ab5. I got to move my queen back, and he castles, and I play h6. I'm like trying to prepare the King's Indian idea still with f5, but it's not so simple because this knight doesn't have a home with the pawn on b4 now, right? I was thinking about knight b6, but that didn't look right at all either. I was thinking maybe he plays like c5, and my position just looks awful from there. Like, so let's just say like b6, c5. Like, this just looks awful, right? So I played knight h7 thinking I was going to go knight g5, f5. I'll put this knight somewhere and then I'll figure it out from there. But I played b6 just so that you can't advance with c5 so easily. Bishop d3. Here I'm trying to chip away at these pawns for whatever reason. I should really be focused on trying to get f5 in, but for whatever reason I felt like I needed to do something here, even though it's all like kind of held down and fine. But yeah, queen b3. I take, like, I'm not sure why I'm taking, like, I guess I get this open file, but I guess the reason was knight c5, but now it's not quite as good. Like, I could still have f5 ideas, which I do play in the game, but I did feel like I wasted a lot of time looking back at this. So here I finally do get to play f5, and I'm thinking, okay, I might be able to get an attack here. It looks decent, right? You know, I can play knight g5, or maybe even just knight f6 again, even though it's kind of dumb. But he played queen b1, and I thought I had a tactic here where I could go, which is what I did in the game, fe4, knight e4, knight e4, queen e4, bishop f5, and I thought, okay, when the queen moves, I can push e4. This bishop will see this rook, and this knight will be under attack. And I was like, oh, this looks like a good tactic. He plays queen e3, and then when I played e4, I'm like, well, after he played his next moves, I was like, oh, this doesn't work because he has knight d4. And it's like, that doesn't work. This tactic didn't work. So now I feel dumb for taking on e4. I should have played f4 and just closed it down, kicked his bishop, and tried to get another attack going. But I calculated, and I thought I had a tactic, but I did not. And from here, it just goes from bad to worse. This b pawn is just really awkward. There's like a million things that can attack it. This d pawn is too far back relative to the e pawn, or I guess you could say the e pawn is way too far forward, right? And I did all of this because I thought I had a tactic, but I did not. Now he gets a knight post on outpost on c6, which is really bad because it's controlling my back rank. Oops, what the fuck? It's controlling my back rank and these e7 and a7 squares, which the a7 square he can use to infiltrate with his rook. It also just cuts off a lot of like squares for my queen. So I decided to go into this trade of taking on a1. He's gonna take the rook in response, and then we'll trade minor pieces. I'm like, okay, I got rid of his knight, so I should be okay. It's still 2 minor pieces, but he has the bishop pair. My pawn structure kind of sucks. Well, yeah, my pawn structure just kind of sucks. I played queen g7 just to like kick his rook away, but he plays rook b1. I have to go back to e7, and you can see here things are just not going well. The b pawn is under attack, and I basically can't defend it well enough regardless of what I do. So he does take it. I try to relocate to defend my d pawn, but again, his pieces are just perfectly able to win the d pawn, and my pieces are just dumb. Like this bishop doesn't belong here, and this knight never actually got rerouted to g5 or never went back to f6 to try to do something. But I mean, I did it now. Woo, yeah. But then he just takes my pawn. Gotta move out of the way. And so this is trapping my bishop, and I thought I had to move knight h3 with a check, and then I could try to take this pawn afterwards. But I didn't see this. I didn't see the queen is covering the h3 square, and I blundered another piece, and I resigned. So a lot of pieces being blundered. It's just the board vision wasn't there today. I felt like a lot of mental capabilities weren't there today, which is really annoying. But you know, such is life with these games. Okay, going into game number 4, and I'm fairly confident this is game number 4. I have the white pieces against him again. So we're gonna just get into our normal new opening lines. So this time around he plays a bishop f5 kind of situation here, which I've seen before, so I kind of know what the general idea is. We get into a closed Catalan, and rather than castling, I go for immediate c4 after my normal development with the bishop and the fianchetto bishop and the knight. And the idea is that I want to play queen b3 to try to attack this b7 pawn. And the b7 pawn is a bit more of a liability when the bishop comes out to f5 or g4 because it's not defending the pawn. And it's even a little more awkward when you have this pawn pushed to e6. So like now this is a bit more of a threat than it usually is. And granted, black is not losing, but you know, the main move is actually just queen b6, offering a queen trade, to which you can play c5 trade, take, and life goes on. He plays b6, so I'm like, okay, I feel like it's not the greatest move because this diagonal is actually somewhat vulnerable now, especially with your bishop on this side of the board. So I castled first before doing anything. He played knight a6, which I didn't want him to come to b4. I don't know if that was his plan or not. b4. Like, I know you can always reroute to c7, but just in case he wanted to play knight b4 because, you know, the c2 square could come under fire, I just played a3. He plays bishop d6, so I'm like, okay. I'm kind of like mixing two different ideas and two different lines of this opening, but when the bishop comes onto d6, generally you want to try to go for knight c3, knight d2, and then e4, because after some trades you get tempo on this bishop and you might be able to make something happen afterwards. So that's what I do. Knight c3, castles, knight fd2, or I guess just knight d2. Here he plays rook b8. I thought he was going to try to push b5, and I was thinking about playing a4 to try to stop it, but I felt like controlling this b4 square was a little more important to just not allow any knight infiltrations, or bishop infiltrations, I guess, too. But yeah, it was originally there for the knight, so I figured, okay, I don't want to really let his knight come to b4, so let me just keep everything there. Now I finally get to push e4. It's got three attackers, 3 defenders, so we're good there. So he takes on e4, take back. And this is the situation I was trying to talk about before, where I'm kind of hitting his bishop, and if you trade, I just get uncontested diagonal on this diagonal here. So he plays bishop e7, and this is like the one tempo I was kind of talking about. And furthermore, because this bishop is not here anymore, I can actually take that diagonal myself and put some pressure on his position. I'm just attacking his rook, which is not really much, but you know, it's something. So he plays rook c8. I play rook a d1, just defending this pawn. I could have also played my f rook to d1, and then the a rook goes to c1, but I figured, well, this is the semi-open file, so I probably want this rook to go to e1 instead of d1, so that, well, I'll have a rook on a half open file. So that's why I played rook a d1. Knight finally reroutes to c7, which I'm like, okay, sure. But I was looking at this position, I'm like, your knight doesn't have any squares to go to, right? Like, this is all covered. That's being blocked by your pawn. Like, your knight kind of sucks. And there's a thought in my head where I was like, oh, I can trade. But I'm like, no, why? What? No, don't trade. Knight can't do anything. So, game continues. I play queen a4. I thought this would be a decent fork on his pawns. And even throughout the game, I thought I was, like, pretty decently ahead. But he counterattacks with g5. I was like, whoa, what are you doing there, bud? I just played knight e3 just to keep it cool. The computer says bishop c1 was the move, which I was just like, what? What? Sure. But yeah, bishop e3, a5, took the c6 pawn. And then here, I mean, I knew this discovered attack was coming. He was going to be able to get knight d4, some kind of knight move to expose his rook attacking my queen. So I just went out of the way. And here he routes to f6. And apparently this is like super winning for white if I do play knight takes f6. But I didn't see anything past knight takes f6, bishop takes f6. Like I didn't see anything here. I'm up a pawn. I have good center control. But I didn't see a reason why this was so winning for white. c5 apparently is the move. And again, like even looking at this, I'm like, take here. Oh, I guess the idea is to try to push your past pawns. Okay. See, like I didn't see this far ahead, but I guess I kind of need to in this opening because like there's so many lines in the Catalan where it's like if I saw like 6 moves ahead, maybe not 6, maybe like 4. If I saw like 4 moves ahead, then I may have been able to see these advantages, but I just like don't. I just don't. So yeah, going back to the position here, knight f6. I just took another free pawn. I'm like, okay, this can't be bad, right? I'm up 2 pawns. But it's only plus 1.5, so he's got some compensation for the 2 pawns, like barely. Knight g5, or sorry, knight g4. You know, I was kind of fine with giving him my bishop, to be honest. Well, more importantly, I need to move my knight. But, you know, if you want to take my bishop, like, I guess I can't really stop that. So knight f3, b5. And I saw that if I take with the pawn, he has this fork here protected by the rook. And I was like, I don't really want to allow that. So I took with the queen. And then after... And I saw this as well, like, all from here. I was like, okay, queen b5, rook b8, queen a4. He takes my b pawn. And I was like, okay, this is fine. Like, it's not too bad. Apparently it was that bad. Well, it's more that I didn't play the right move. I was supposed to play rook d2, apparently, which does stop his idea, all things considered. But I figured, ooh, me jump knight into middle. But yeah, that doesn't work. He trades off my bishop and then plays bishop c2, forking my rook and queen, which I was trying to avoid in the first place, but yet it still happened, amazingly enough. But I just moved my queen out of the way. I'd go down the exchange, but I had 2 pawns to begin with, so material is actually equal now, and I'm like, okay, it's not too bad. It's not too bad. But he attacks my queen after winning that exchange, so I'm like, okay, let me get out of here. Takes my free a pawn, which I totally did not realize was hanging, if I'm going to be completely honest. I was just like, oh, oops. But yeah, I played knight g4. I wanted to try to attack his king. Like, this g-pawn not being here, I felt like I could try to exploit maybe some kind of weird sequencing of knight h6, maybe some weird world where I can play queen f6 and then bishop e4 somehow. But he plays queen g4. I'm just like, screw it. Let's offer a queen trade. And he takes it. But apparently, even though, like, okay, so he's up a pawn, which is fine, but this is like -3. He doesn't see the right move, thankfully. And he plays bishop b2. And I'm like, okay, well, let me counterattack your rook with rook c5. And again, apparently I'm losing. The move he needed to play was rook b4, which adds another attacker to my pawn, which makes sense. But he plays the wrong move and plays rook c6. And yeah, my bishop still exists on the board, so I just took it. And here he resigned. Bit of a big blunder there. I guess even if I blunder, he can blunder as well. So yeah, that was very fortunate for me. All right, so this is the 5th and final game that we played. And you know, I was like, okay, in my head, I'm like, oh, let's make this a best of 5 because we've both won 2 games. And, you know, it'd be kind of fun to, like, play a best of 5 rapid. But yeah. Nothing new, d4. And here, I took a few seconds to think. I'm like, all right, am I going to go back into knight f6, knight f3, g6, c4? I was like, you know what? Let's put my tryhard pants on, f5. This is my normal repertoire, right? And I know I was like, oh, I'm only going to play the new openings. But I was like, nah, I need to win this game. Let me stick to what I know well. So, after, I mean, it's been one move. f5, c4. So we're going into a classical Dutch. e6, knight f3, bishop e7. I was considering playing the bishop b4 lines here, but you know, the whole point of this is if the knight is on c3, because you get to damage their pawn structure. Here he can do something like that. And yeah, I just felt like this wasn't really what I wanted. His dark squared bishop, at least in the Dutch, the dark squared bishop for white isn't that annoying of a piece. So I was just like, like, yeah, I'm gonna trade off a bishop for bishop, and that's fine. But really, what I wanted was to trade off this knight in particular, because it weakens his eventual control of e4, right? Because he would play knight c3 controls e4. I mean, he's not. I'm not saying he's gonna play it, but the idea is like I want to put a knight on there, so I want to get rid of this knight so that he can't take it. That's the whole idea. But he plays e3. I'm like, okay, normal stuff. Castles. Bishop d3. If you don't fianchetto the light squared bishop is white, then I will. He plays a3, which is actually not a bad move. Because one of the systems, if you don't trade the bishop, for this knight here, one of the ideas is to try to play an early a5 and reroute your knight from b8 to a6 and try to plant it on b4. It also just controls the c2 square because sometimes the queen is there as well, but a3 obviously stops that. So, you know, development kind of continues. He goes knight bd2. I'm not really sure why he played knight bd2. Knight c3 just feels more natural and does the same thing, and I don't have b4 bishop b4 check or not check, but bishop b4 anymore. Yeah, so I wasn't really sure why he played knight d2, but whatever, he does. d6 kind of blunts the bishop, the dark squared bishop, which is, again, what I was getting at before. Like, a dark squared bishop's not usually that big of a threat in this opening. But castles, here I played knight e4. I thought this was a little too early after the fact because of queen c2. And thankfully I played the right move, which was knight d2. I was actually really considering playing knight g5. Excuse me. And after some kind of trade like this, oh, he has d5 now. d5 doesn't even look that bad, if I'm going to be completely honest. Bishop takes f5. Now it's +3. Crazy. Yeah, so I kind of wanted to play knight g5 and just be like, all right, I messed up and played knight e4 too early. But I was like, no, let me try to at least justify knight e4 a little bit. So I took on d2. He takes back with the knight, which I was like, okay, fine. Played knight d7, and then he brings his knight back to f3, which, I mean, sure, I guess. It is a relatively close position, so you kind of have time to do things. Queen e8 is a very common idea in the Dutch. You're trying to bring your queen either to h5 and then rook lift, or you can like do something like queen b6 to try to support another knight going to e4. He plays queen b3, and I kind of saw his idea of like trying to play something like c5 to pressure this pawn here. I didn't think it was too big of a threat, so I just played queen b6. Also, it does defend the e6 pawn that could get weak if this opens up. So I'm like, all right, great. And then here he kind of missed this tactic where, my queen is aligned with this king and my bishop is staring down the open diagonals, so free knight. Yeah, he kind of like recoiled a little bit when he realized after playing h3, like, oh, yeah, he kind of realized after the fact, which happens to all of us, really. Like, we play a move and then we realize why it's a bad move, but we can't make that realization before we make the move, which it sucks. It happens to everyone. There's not really much you can do about it besides just be a little more premeditated with your moves, I guess. But anyway, bishop f3. You can't take my bishop because you're pinned, right? So he tries to cover up with bishop g3. Right now he can take because there's no pin anymore. So I just retreat back. I was pretty okay with this trade because I could try to push d5 later. If he pushes d5, I mean, I'm just going to close it down. You might be able to win this pawn back later, but that's fine. I'm just going to bring my pieces in and try to attack you again. So I wasn't really concerned about a trade on e4. So as you saw, he declines to trade also just because he's down a piece, right? So he plays bishop e2. I played bishop h4. I'm trying to get rid of this bishop so that I can get this checkmate in. Obviously, he's not going to be so willing to do that. So he plays bishop f3. And here I looked at a few sequence capture chain things, and I'm like, okay, so take here first. He could totally, well, actually, no, you can't. You can't take this way because it's mate. So he takes back with the pawn, trade bishops, and now it's mate in 6, but I'm going to have to warn you, the rest of this game is of very horrible quality. So I'll show you what I mean, unfortunately. So queen g3, king h1, only move. Queen h3, king g1, only move. And I missed the mate in 4 here, which is queen g3 again. I needed to play queen g3 first because after king h1, rook f6 and rook h6 is basically unstoppable. You can try to defend with like rook f2, but I could just take. And I can actually just play rook h6 anyway, and like your only defense doesn't even work. So I missed this mate, and I played rook f6 first, but that gives him the f2 square to escape. So I missed this idea. I was like, wow, I missed mate. So he gets to play king f2, and I give him a check just to force him onto the back rank. And now he can't connect his rooks to try to counterattack me. So I'm like, okay, this should be fine. I played rook g6 trying to come in and maybe I get checkmate. But he plays rook d1, rook g2, and then he plays queen d3, just defending the square from this mate. So I saw this mate get defended, but I totally missed the other mate, which was queen to either of these two squares on this diagonal. rook f2 is the only move, and then I just take it. So it'd be like this, this, that, and that's mate. Totally missed that one. And I played e5. I played e5, trying to dislodge the queen from protecting the square, at least without being attacked. After d5, I still have this idea. Oops. I still have this idea. But again, I don't see it. And I played e4, thinking, okay, I get a square for my knight to come in and then checkmate maybe. So takes. Obviously, you can't take here because it's mate. So, what do you do? He played queen d2. There's no checkmate anymore, so I was like, okay, just give me the queen. Take the exchange. Now I saw queen g3 check, but I don't have a rook to give mate anymore. So I just brought my rook in because this rook has not been doing anything for 30 moves. And also this rook is pinned, so you can't even come in to infiltrate. He plays rook e2, knight e5, just bringing the knight in, trying to help with the attack. King f1, I trade rooks, and again, there's like a mate. Well, there's a mate in 3 here apparently with knight f3, which I didn't see. Cool. Trade rooks, bring the knight in. I'm basically gonna like force him to give up the rook somehow, some way. He plays rook g2, and again, I missed a mate in 1 with queen e8, or sorry, queen e1. And I was looking, and I'm like, all right, you know what? Just give me all of your pieces. I'm gonna win all of your pawns. And that's basically what happens here. I'm just gonna skip through the rest of this. His king can't stop both the h pawn and the b pawn, so yeah, he just resigned here. That was the last game, so I did end up winning this impromptu best of 5, 3-2. And yeah, no, this game was awful. I missed like 4 different checkmates. And admittedly, I've been playing for like 4 hours in a row at this point. So maybe I was tired, but like I don't excuse myself for missing mates, because, you know, if you see every mate that's ever on the board, you will win all of those games rather than get into a potentially losing endgame or like equal endgame from a winning position. So yeah, you can see from the games today, minus the one really good game that I had, of course, just a lot of bad moves. Like I blundered a queen, I blundered a piece against Anthony, I blundered another piece against Wayne in another game, and yeah, I don't know what it was today. Just bad. It was just bad. I will go over the how I felt about the new openings in a separate video, mainly because I want to collect my thoughts first before I like actually ramble about what it is that I'm experiencing. So thanks for watching today's recap. I am gonna go back to playing my original stuff, or at least what I think I want to play against everyone in the club now. Now that I have like a d4 opening and I have an e4 opening, and I have two openings for 2 responses against d4, 2 against e4. You know, I have options now, and I can reconsider what I want to play against everyone. So I probably will be doing that over the weekend, or what's left of the weekend, before our next meet. So stay tuned for me trying to learn new openings for a month, and catch you guys there.